This is CBS News Detroit Special Report.
And thank you for joining us for this CBS News Special Report. I'm Rochelle Graham.
And I'm Terrence Friday. We are following this UAW situation, waiting to see what President Shawn Fain has to say. He's supposed to be speaking at 10 o'clock, and at some point we will break out of this coverage and go to him to hear what he has to say. Right now we do have an expert in here with us. We are going to be talking to you. I know this is something that you've been following as well very closely. The editor-in-chief of Headlight.news, excuse me. Thank you for being here with us.
My pleasure.
So we are waiting to see, what he has to say and the direction that he will be giving those members. What are your thoughts on what we could possibly hear?
The most intense movement he could make would be to strike the entire industry, the Detroit manufacturers. That would put almost 150,000 people on the streets. However, it would also be drawing down what is a large union strike fund. But at $500 a week times 150,000 workers, even an $827 million strike fund could be drawn down very quickly. I think he will target, again, specific plants and probably go after the nerve center, the plants that generate the most revenue. It would be no surprise at all if he goes after plants, for example, that produce the F-150 from Ford, the Silverado from Chevrolet, the GMC Sierra, and the Ram 1500.
So you're talking about very big makes and models where they will certainly feel the pinch.
If you took the F-150, all of the F-Series vehicles, in fact, it's something like $40 billion a year in revenue. It would make one of the largest companies in the United States. So they could hurt Ford very badly, very quickly, without putting all Ford plants down. And that would seem to be one of the likely possibilities here.
Again, a reminder, this is going to be very fluid this morning. We're waiting on that Facebook Live from Fain. We'll also have live reports from CBS Detroit's Jordan Burroughs and Andres Gutierrez. So at any moment, we may have to break away. Can you give people a little bit of a reminder on what it is that the union is demanding, what you think they really would like to see come out of this? We know they had a lot of demands. What three did they boil down to?
Yeah, 700, and some of these are down on the factory floor. It can even affect restroom quality and things like that. From what we understand, all the non-economic issues have been largely solved. There may be one or two here or there, but that's not a big problem. They're not going to go on strike over quality of a cafeteria at one plant. However, the big ones are still really problematic. Wages. We know that they initially asked for something that would be in the high 40% range once you carried it out over a 4-year period. It appears the UAW has dropped a bit. They're probably in the 30% range, but there's still a gap, maybe 10, 15% of an increase. Pensions are a critical issue. Time off is an issue. Fain has laid the groundwork for something few expect to happen this time, but long term, the UAW is clearly moving for a 32-hour work week. And of course, one of the big ones, the one that really hits union members hardest, is the two-tier wage structure.
Can you explain that a little bit for people who maybe don't understand what it is they have in place right now?
Yeah, when it was first enacted, you had veterans, people who were in the industry, who were getting a very good wage, but then anybody new who came in would start off at a very much lower wage. And there was no clear path for those people to make it up to the higher tier. That's been changed a bit over the years. They can make the jump, but that still means people working side by side will make substantially different amounts. And let's face it, the UAW is one of the elites of the blue-collar movement. They make good money. Typically more than teachers, lawyers, police officers and the like. But when you look at the lower tier, in some cases that isn't very good money. It's not a lot better in some cases than people are making over at a fast food joint.
Okay, and we do know that there is a big economic impact that all of this is having just throughout the area with the striking happening, so we are waiting to see the details on that. We do have our reporters who are out in the field for us to bring us those updates and those visuals from what we're seeing out there. I understand that Andres Gutierrez is live for us right now to bring us a look at what you're seeing out there. Andres?
Yeah, Terry, just a short moment ago, we heard from the Anderson Economic Group where they're saying that this first week of the strike has cost the economy over $1 billion, $1.6 billion specifically. There are 4 factors that they considered regarding this. This is lost wages, suppliers lost, and lost earnings from the big 3 automakers. They break it down this way, that their lost wages have resulted in $107 million of losses. Companies have lost $511 million during this first week, and industry-wide there have been $1.1 billion that have been lost as a result of this. And we just talk about how many layoffs are also happening as a result of this strike. You already have GM that announced earlier this week that KCK had to, the plant in Kansas City, Kansas, or KCK as locals call it, have had to lay off 2,000 employees because that plant depends on parts that are made in Wentzville, Missouri, and that plant was one of the 3 that went down offline last Friday morning at midnight. Then Stellantis had to lay off 68 people at their machinist plant in outside of Toledo, and more than 300 people could be laid off at any time at their Kokomo, Indiana plant where they make transmissions. So again, it's not only a matter of how many, I think the question here when Shawn Fain speaks in a couple of minutes is how many more plants will he take offline? Are we talking about another 3, 1 at each company, or are we going to talk about dozens? So that's what we're waiting to hear. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and toss it back to you guys.
All right, Andres, thank you.
Yeah, with how much he's been covering this, he's probably hearing honking in his sleep. We still have Paul with us. You mentioned something during that live report that I think is really important. I hate to say trickle down because that makes you think of an entirely different political story. But what's the trickle down impact of this, these workers on strike?
According to the Alliance for Automotive Innovation, there are about 11.5 indirect jobs affected by every 1 job on the assembly line.
Wow.
And that can be the people that do maintenance on the factory lots, supply goods, or so on. So think about the numbers. Let's do a quick math. If we have roughly 150,000 UAW workers that might eventually go out on strike, the whole force goes out. We're talking about what? My math is would say what, about 1.75 million people who might indirectly be affected, but have a lot of their earnings coming because of automotive manufacturing. But that's not really a complete picture, because there's also the shops nearby the assembly plant where people may stop to pick up flowers to bring home to the husband or wife, the bar nearby, the luncheonette, all those others. So the reality is it could ultimately affect 3 million, 4 million people. And then the trickle down, because you have a lot less money, $500 in strike money, that's barely going to cover most people's monthly expenses. So they're spending less at the supermarket, they're spending less to go on vacation, and so on. So the impact could be severe enough. Some say if this strike lasts, it could trigger a full-on recession.
All right, and we have been waiting to hear from UAW President Shawn Fain. He is prepared to speak now. We're going to listen in.
For our union. Last night, 2,900 graduate workers at Northeastern University voted by an overwhelming 94% to form their union with the UAW. Congratulations first and foremost to these workers who have fought a multi-year effort against intense employer opposition to win their union. And also to Regional Director Brandon Mancia and lead organizer Josh Gilbert for their great work on this effort. In Region 1, 400 workers at Lear, the auto parts supplier, just joined Local 155. President William Verdier and Recording Secretary Sylvanus Thomas worked hard to help bring these workers into our union. From auto to higher ed and everywhere in between, our union is organizing, growing, and building our power. It's not just new organizing, it's on the picket line too. Our 1,400 UAW members at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan just marked a week on strike. For years, the insurer has been outsourcing their work. Our UAW family at Blue Cross Blue Shield was once 5,000 strong. Today it's shrunk down to just 1,400. And the workers that are left are stuck in a tiered system where it takes 22 years to get to top pay. Our members have said enough is enough, and they are being strongly supported by Secretary-Treasurer Margaret Mock, Region 1A Director LaShawn English, and Region 1D Director Steve Dawes. They are all working together to raise awareness and build public support for this critical fight. Just yesterday, members of Local 259 in Region 9A struck for one day after their employer, an Infinity dealership on Long Island, refused to come to the bargaining table. Management was suddenly quick to move, and they have set new dates for the negotiations. And at ZF in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, in Region 8, nearly 200 members of Local 2083 who make front axles for Mercedes are on strike after voting down a contract that would have raised healthcare costs, maintained tiers, and left workers behind economically. They're being supported all out by Region Director Tim Smith, and they will win. Outside Philadelphia, our Local 644 members at Domedek are fighting for their fair share. The company's making a killing, but many workers don't make a living wage. Region 9 Director Dan Vicente, who comes out of Domedek, has their back. And some of you may know Dan was hospitalized after suffering sudden and severe complications from COVID. But the day he was discharged, he recorded a message of support for his Domedek family. Nothing can keep Dan or our union down. Not far away in Dayton, New Jersey, our Local 2326 members at West Rock Packaging are standing strong in their strike. When COVID was at its worst, they worked overtime to make the cardboard packaging that kept our economy going. They made the company and CEO David Sewell rich. But now he wants to slash their health care, and we're not going to let it happen. In Newton, Iowa, our Local 997 members at Thombert are facing down another employer that wants workers to go backwards. Thombert refused to start bargaining until 1 week before our contract expired. Sound familiar? Then the company insisted on cuts to accident and sickness benefits. Our workers aren't having it, and Region 4 Director Brandon Campbell is giving them the support that they need. In just over a week, the contract for 3,500 workers at Mack Truck in Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Florida is going to expire. Our union family at Mack are fighting back against attacks on their health care, a 6-year progression to top rate, frozen cost of living allowance, and tiers that have left new hires without retirement security. The stand-up strike movement is not just about the big three. Everywhere, UAW members in the working class are ready to stand up against corporate greed and stand up for our communities. Finally, I want to lift up our members who have been holding a line at the big three for the past week. Local 2250, Region 4 in Wentzville, Missouri at GM, Local 12, Region 2B in Toledo, Ohio at Stellantis, and Local 900, Region 1A at Michigan Assembly in Wayne, Michigan. They have shown us leadership, courage, and creativity on the picket line. You might have seen some of the videos of music being played on the picket lines or the long lines of Jeeps and Broncos in organized caravans. We salute them, and all I can say is reinforcements are coming. As we've said for weeks, we're not going to wait around forever for a fair contract at the big three. The companies know how to make this right. The public is on our side, and the members of the UAW are ready to stand up. Obviously, we're doing things differently this time around. Our stand-up strike strategy is designed to do one thing: win record contracts after years of record profits. We're focused on moving the companies at the bargaining table. That means maintaining our flexibility and our leverage to escalate as we need to. We can and we'll go all out if our national leadership decides the companies aren't willing to move. Right now, we think we can get there. Stellantis and GM in particular are going to need some serious pushing. Obviously, going on strike isn't something we take lightly, and it's not something we do without a clear strategy to win. So let's talk about our strategy at the Big Three and what's happening in negotiations. As you know, we gave our members' demands to the company 2 months ago. They wasted over a month failing to respond. And there has been some movement. In particularly, this last week, we've made some real progress at Ford. We're not there yet, but I want you to see the direction that Ford is going and what we think that means for our contract fight. So at Ford, the Rawsonville Components and Sterling Axle employees will now be on the same wage scale as assembly workers. We have eliminated that entire wage tier. We've also officially reinstated the cost of living allowance that was suspended in 2009. UAW family, that's important because many people said this couldn't be done, and we just did it. We've also won, for the first time in our history, the right to strike over plant closures during the life of our agreement. I don't have to tell you that this is an important victory in our fight to save our jobs, keep families together, and keep our communities from being gutted. Also at Ford, we've won additional job security for our members in the event of layoff. If that happens, our members, including temporary workers, will now receive income security for up to 2 years with health care. We have moved Ford off of their concessionary formula to cut profit sharing and instead want an enhanced profit sharing formula that would have resulted in a 13.3% increase for average employee in payouts last year. We've won the immediate conversion of all current temps, and all temps will have profit sharing after 90 days service at Ford. And there are no concessions on the table. All that represents serious movement on tiers, on cost of living, on pay, and on job security. But to be clear, we're not done at Ford. We still have serious issues to work through, but we do want to recognize that Ford is showing that they're serious about reaching a deal. At GM and Stellantis, it's a different story. We have won a serious victory at CCA and GMCH, and we have killed those wage tiers. Those workers will now be on the same wage scale as assembly workers. Their first offer was a 0% raise for those workers. But without cost of living allowance, without strong job security, those gains aren't protected. Both companies are still offering a deficient cost of living allowance that is projected to provide 0 increases over the next 4 years. Both of those companies have rejected all of our job security proposals. Both GM and Stellantis have rejected our profit sharing proposals. And both companies have rejected our proposals to convert temps. So today, at noon Eastern Time, all of the parts distribution facilities at General Motors and Stellantis are being called to stand up and strike. We will be striking 38 locations across 20 states, across all 9 regions of the UAW. At General Motors, we call on the CCAs at Pontiac, Willow Run, Ypsilanti, Davison Road, Flint, Lansing, Cincinnati, Denver, Hudson, Wisconsin, Chicago, Reno, Rancho Cucamonga, Fort Worth, Martinsburg, Jackson, Charlotte, Memphis, and Philadelphia to stand up and go on strike. At Stellantis, we call on the parts distribution centers at Marysville, Centerline Packaging, Centerline Warehouse, Sherwood, Warren Parts, Quality Engineering Center, Romulus, Cleveland, Milwaukee, Minneapolis, Denver, Chicago, Los Angeles, Portland, Atlanta, Winchester, Orlando, Dallas, New York, and Boston to stand up and go on strike. The plants that are already on strike will remain on strike. That's Local 2250 at GM Wentzville, Local 900 Ford Michigan Assembly, and Local 12 at Stellantis Toledo Assembly. We invite and encourage everyone who supports our cause to join us on the picket line, from our friends and families all the way up to the President of the United States. We invite you to join us in our fight. The way you can help is to build our movement and show the companies that the public stands with us and stands with our elected national negotiators. As promised, we're expecting to stand up strike in response to the lack of progress in bargaining with General Motors and Stellantis. We will shut down parts distribution until those two companies come to their senses and come to the table with a serious offer. The members who will join the stand-up strike today are living testament to one of the injustices we are fighting against at the Big Three: tiers. At Stellantis and GM, under the current MOPAR and CCA structures, workers at parts distribution centers are permanently stuck on a lower wage scale. For workers hired after 2015, top pay maxes out at just $25 an hour, and it takes 8 years to get there. GM has offered to bring those workers into an assembly wage scale, but without cost of living and job security like we've won at Ford, those members are still at serious risk. This week, the president of GM wrote an op-ed talking about how supposedly great the wages are for 85% of their workers. We fight for 100% of our members, and we are committed to ending tiers across the board. That's just one of our core issues that we're still fighting for as we continue our stand-up strike. So at noon Eastern today, all parts distribution centers at General Motors and Stellantis will be on strike. This will impact these two companies' repairs operations, and our message to the consumer is simple. The way to fix the frustrating customer experience is for the companies to end price gouging. Invest these record profits into stable jobs and sustainable wages and benefits. It's that simple. This expansion will also take our fight nationwide. We will be everywhere from California to Massachusetts, from Oregon to Florida. And we will keep going, keep organizing, and keep expanding the stand-up strike as necessary. Across the country, people are going to know that the UAW is ready to stand up for our communities and ready to stand up against corporate greed. And I know more of you are ready to walk. I've seen incredible strike-ready demonstrations across the country. Local 551 and Local 862, we see you. Spring Hill, I know you're ready to go. And Kokomo, stand ready. Stick with us and be prepared. I've also heard of the members standing strong on the job. Remember, it's your right to refuse voluntary overtime. Under an expired contract, management has fewer rights to make unilateral changes. If you see something being changed in your workplace without bargaining, please head to uaw.org/standup and report it. You are our eyes and ears. Our greatest protection we have is each other, and we won't let the Big Three break the law. Finally, I want to remind all of you of one thing. The world is watching, and the people are on our side. We've seen poll after poll come out saying the American people support what we are doing. In fact, polls say support for our strike is growing. That's across parties, across ages, and across all kinds of people. And it's not just the U.S. Obviously, we've been in close contact with our Unifor family in Canada, and I know that all of you have been cheering them. Their fight is our fight. We've been in close contact with our Mexican union counterparts who have held demonstrations in front of GM offices in Mexico City. In Italy, 6,000 Stellantis workers recently went on strike. To our Italian union family, your fight is an inspiration. We support you, and your struggle is our struggle. From South Africa to Malaysia, we continue to receive letters and messages of strength and support, encouraging our members to hold the line and win big. And we will. So now it's time to hit the picket lines across the country. It's time to show the companies we are united and we are fired up and we are ready for a record contract. It's time to stand up against corporate greed. It's time to stand up for our communities. UAW family, I'll see you on the picket line.
All right, that was UAW President Shawn Fain. 50-some thousand people watching. I think it was the entirety of that live stream. It dipped to 49,000 at the very end. We were all feverishly taking notes here. A lot of big developments.
Yeah, certainly so. And he's standing 10 toes down on everything they've been saying and demanding, actually calling for more people to join them.
That's not a surprise. I am a little surprised by what he decided to do, who he's going after. This is really interesting because, first of all, he's only going after General Motors and Stellantis. He's giving a reward.
It sounded like he made significant progress with Ford.
Yeah, I had been expecting that Ford would probably be the lead in this for quite a while. Bill Ford himself has been actively involved in the negotiations at various points, and he's seeming to signal that they're ready to go along with the union, not on everything, but get closer to what the union wanted. So this is a clear move by saying, Ford, we're letting you go. They could give that automaker a significant advantage while punishing GM and Stellantis. The other thing that's important is the decision not to hit individual assembly plants, but to go over to parts plants, because those cripple other assembly plants without having to take workers off the line. And if I understand correctly what they're doing here, this is also going to be felt very directly across the country by consumers, because this means that dealers, their repair shops, may not be able to get the critical parts they need to make repairs. So within, who knows, a matter of days, some parts could be in short supply on the repair shop floor. I have heard that the automakers are trying to get white-collar workers in to handle some of the work. Whether they can completely keep those parts plants going or those parts distribution centers going is a big question. And we've also heard that the Teamsters won't cross picket lines. So even if they can get the white-collar workers in doing things, they may not be able to get those parts shipped.
Yeah, parts and distribution in 38 locations. I mean,
Right.
I had chills when I saw those full screens come up about Stellantis and GM. That's certainly going to be significant.
Yeah, and if he is calling for all of those facilities to join them, joining the ones that are already striking, you touched on the impact a little bit earlier. What impact could this have?
Well, this will clearly have an impact in terms of, as I mentioned, consumers, because we may see a shortage of repair parts. But it may also impact other assembly plants, because without the distribution of parts, you have a lot of plants that aren't officially on strike, but they're not going to be able to build vehicles. Now, in turn, if what we've seen this last week does happen now, you're going to see some other assembly plants that simply don't have parts have to go on temporary layoff. And in some cases, many cases perhaps, workers who are not officially on strike according to Fain, they will actually be laid off, and under the agreements they have, they won't be able to get unemployment benefits. So it will actually also affect other workers who are not, according to Fain, officially standing up and walking out.
All right, Paul, thank you. Stay with us. We are going to check in live with both Jordan Burroughs and Andres Gutierrez. They have been covering this for weeks. They are outside right now with some of those UAW workers who have been on strike. We'd love to get the reaction that you felt and saw out there.
Well, I think first of all, I mean, we heard it. I mean, right when they announced that 38 plants in 20 states are going to go on strike and join, union workers here, it was audible. I mean, they were excited. Two things. I think, one, they know that Ford has made the most headway in these negotiations. And two, their brothers and sisters around the state that are in UAW are going to picket and strike as well.
Yeah, for me, what's really striking is that Stellantis, they've been from the very beginning offering the higher amounts of wage increases, right? They were the first ones on the first round offered 12.5%. They're now offering 21%. But Shawn Fain saying this morning that they are essentially now saying, rejecting all of the proposals, the cost of living adjustments that they want, the job securities and the profit sharing, and so they're not being serious about that. And so I think that is really what, you know, this all boils down to, that, you know, Ford is at least giving some headway.
Yeah, some concessions.
Concessions regarding COLA.
And I definitely think the most important thing to note, too, is what I've heard from UAW members here is the cost of living adjustment's huge. The pension's also huge because the 32-hour work week, they think that was just an added bonus. Like we've heard, there's 700 plus demands that they're looking for, but there's ones that are more important than others. Something that I think is important to add, too, is so they're getting paid $500 a week as their strike pay. I don't know if this has been confirmed yet, but workers out here believe that if every single UAW member went on strike, that's 150,000 people, at $500 a week, they say that would only last 11 weeks. So the fact that there's still, I mean, there'll be 41 plants on strike, that strike pay could still last, I mean, for months if that's where they're going to go.
Right. And well, I think the biggest thing about this is that he's taking this strike now nationwide. For the last week, we've only seen it in 3 states, right here, Ohio, and in Missouri. But now it's going to be from coast to coast. So it's definitely going to get the attention of more people. You're saying that the president tweeting.
Yeah, Joe Biden tweeted right at 10 a.m. I don't think that's a coincidence. It was a video of him talking about go union, go union. So I think obviously he knows what's going on here, and I think there are people all around the country now. That was his big message as he ended his Facebook Live, that 50,000 plus people, was the world is watching. There are people all around the nation that are mostly in support, as we've seen from the data and research. Almost 80% of the public supports what's going on here.
Yeah, so let's break down the exact plans here in our area that are going offline here, the parts distributions part. So in Pontiac, the redistribution site there, Willow Run, Ypsilanti, the Davidson Road Processing Center in Burton, Michigan, the Flint Processing Center, Lansing Redistribution. The other ones, Stellantis, it's Marysville, the Centerline Packaging, Centerline Warehouse, two in Warren, one is the Sherwood and Warren's Parts, the QEC in Auburn Hills, Romulus, and in let's see, just
I mean, all around the state.
Yeah, all around the state.
I mean, we'll be there. I mean, at noon, that's when they're expecting, more strikes to happen. One of us will probably be at one of these other strikes, so it'll be interesting to see if they're out there and ready to go. Because when this happened at midnight, Thursday into Friday, there were people here.
Yeah. Well, in fact, it was they were coming off their shift, and some people decided that, you know, they heard the announcement at 10 o'clock Thursday night last week, and they decided, well, that's it, I'm out. And so by midnight, when the strike officially began, there were already people out here. It was just a massive, a lot of workers out here.
Yeah, certainly made good headway. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens next week. I don't know how often the big three and Shawn Fain are talking, but there's some headway, especially with Ford. I think Ford might help Stellantis and GM maybe pony up to what they're asking for, but like we've all been saying, time will tell. We're only in day 8. We know last time that GM was on strike in 2019, 40 days. That's how long that lasted to.
Yeah, so a lot of eyes will also be tomorrow across the river in Canada, because Unifor will actually present the tentative agreement to its members before they can vote and get it ratified. So we're all keeping an eye out on that particular contract to see what the figures were that essentially allowed them to reach that tentative agreement. Because remember, earlier this week they made that substantial offer right at the last hour, at the 11th hour, and they were able to hold off and they kept negotiations going for another 24 hours and then finally reached the deal. And again, tomorrow those details of that deal will be made public.
Yeah, I think the most important thing before I wrap it up here is the fact that, I mean, there are now 23 plus states that are joining in this across the country. And I mean, here you have already, 20, 30 people that are joining in on this. People are coming out of here. People are walking in here. They're enjoying this, and they're having, I mean, a lot of people are telling me they're enjoying this time off, so to speak, but they're ready to get back to work, and hopefully GM and Stellantis can match Ford.
Absolutely.
Anything else that you that Shawn Fain said that comes to mind that is probably like people need to know about. I think we kind of covered it out here.
Yeah, we did. I think, again, Ford is saying, they're the ones that are serious, and that this, strike is that reinforcements are coming. He's wanting to lift up members across that are already on the picket line. That, he's happy to see that there were those organized convoys, the one that we've seen all week.
The Broncos, right. I mean, there's going to be a lot to come out of this. Andres Gutierrez, Jordan Burroughs here. We're outside the Ford Assembly plant. Day 8, United Auto Workers versus the big three, Stellantis, Ford, and GM. Rochelle and Terrence will be covering it more throughout the week, but we'll throw it back to you guys back in studio.
All right, gentlemen, excellent live coverage. Thank you for that perspective. We appreciate it. And as we've heard, these people are getting here in line, and at 12 o'clock, we could see some major changes. We've been talking about the impact and the ripple effect that this has. I don't know that a lot of people are really grasping how huge of an impact this could be in so many different areas.
Yeah, depending on some of the details, which we still have to figure out, this essentially could dry up the supply of parts, not just to some assembly lines, but also to dealer service centers and even independent dealers who count on factory authorized parts. So there's a possibility that some folks, if this drags on for a while, may find out if they need to get repairs, collision, or just a problem with an engine, they may not be able to get parts as what's in stock at a dealer showroom runs out.
I think we've certainly covered so many components of this. One thing I think maybe of interest to still touch on, UAW President Shawn Fain was talking about public perception.
Yeah.
It was not that long ago when I would argue it was about 50-50 on unions, how people felt about them, how they were perceived by the public. Why do you think we've seen this shift in support?
Well, let me back up for 1 second. One of the things I find intriguing about what Fain is doing this time is putting the emphasis on corporate greed. And I think that most studies now show that the vast majority of the public, even, it doesn't matter which party you support.
Right, that line is blurred now.
When it comes to the sense that corporations are starting to rip off the American public, I think that is probably one of the places where Americans are most united right now. We had seen for decades a decline in membership in unions and support for unions, going back to Ronald Reagan when he fired the air traffic controllers. Union membership has not gone up, but all studies, it doesn't matter again whether it's done by a Republican independent or Democratic pollster, they all show growing support for unions. Now, we've seen some victories. A few people like the UPS workers have had major improvements after a strike or by threatening to strike. And we're going to see more. He mentioned that Mack, the truck manufacturer, may go on strike. And I think the UAW is counting on public support to try to win a number of these negotiations, perhaps prevent a strike.
And I know with this, if we do start to see some more of those frustrations from the public, if this spills over, that's going to put more pressure on these companies as well, because it's now not just the workers, it's affecting the public.
Yeah. What's going to be very interesting going on beyond this is whether this will help the UAW in any way in where it has failed for decades, being able to reach out to some of the non-union automotive plants, what we call the transplants, owned by Toyota, by BMW, by Hyundai, and so on. They're all over the country, and in fact, they're coming in larger numbers because of the Inflation Reduction Act, which requires manufacturers to assemble their EVs here to qualify for incentives. So we're seeing even more foreign-owned manufacturers coming here, but none of those plants, none, have been unionized so far. Fain has to keep in mind that he has to come up with something he can actually reach out to and finally sell to some of those transplant workers to try to get them organized. And I think the number one is actually an American manufacturer, but there is a lot of discontent at Tesla, and if they come out very well with this strike, I would not be surprised if there could be enough support to organize Tesla.
Getting word from the control room, we are going to check in with Jordan Burroughs again live. He has reaction from one of the 50,000 people who are intently watching that Facebook Live from UAW President Shawn Fain. Jordan, what's the reaction there among workers?
I'm in Rochelle. We're outside the Ford assembly plant, and Ford was the one who essentially gave in to the most concessions here. They are offering a lot of what they're looking for. It's not perfect yet, but I can tell you that these employees let out a sigh of relief because they're getting some of the deal so far. We know GM and Stellantis haven't really made any concessions yet, but hopefully that will inspire those two companies to hopefully make an agreement with them. This is someone we've talked to all morning long. This is Scott Alexander. Scott, come in here with us. I saw you with your phone up against your ear. When you first heard the offering that Ford came back with, what did you think?
I was tickled to death. Shawn Fain came through with his bargaining team. Cost of living, that was a big thing for Ford Motor Company. We gave that up in 2008. We're getting it back 15 years later.
What does it mean that now 38 more plants across 20 states will now go on strike as well?
Well, I think it's time for GM and Stellantis to get real. Ford Motor Company listened and they came to the table with some good offers, obviously. GM and Chrysler better hurry up.
I've heard you all morning long. I mean, we've been out here since 4. I think you were here at the 6 o'clock hour, right?
Yes, sir.
I mean, you just want the agreement. You're someone who's been outspoken about this. What is it going to take, you think? Why do you think Ford gave in a little bit to get you guys what you need and you want, and GM and Stellantis aren't playing ball yet?
I don't really think it's that Ford gave in. I think Ford realized that they needed to do this to make it right. GM and Stellantis, they got a long way to go. I think this is going to cost some CEOs maybe their job. You know, it's time.
What do you say to those CEOs maybe at GM and Stellantis that might push them forward?
Mary Barra, Carlos Tavares, take care of your people. That's your bloodline right there.
What do you hope this does for the future of unions and Ford here, especially in Michigan?
This is the middle class's backbone right here. The UAW and the Teamsters, everybody needs to get it. Everybody.
Thank you very much, Scott. Again, Scott Alexander. He's worked here 27 and a half years. Scott, you'll see him around here all morning long. I know you'll be back here next week when you guys continue to picket. Rochelle and Terrence, still a long way to go in negotiations, but Ford seems like they're the closest in making a deal. We'll send it back to you guys.
Thanks, bargaining.
Tickled to death, he said.
Yeah.
That stood out. All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us here this morning. It was certainly a lot to break down. I think with GM and Stellantis, some people hopeful for an agreement. I know I've covered this strike very closely in Flint at the GM assembly plant there, and that went on for, I believe, 40 some days. And we're not there yet, but.
Good. Well, I think this is good news in one way and concerning news in others.
We will be watching to see how it plays out. He set that deadline for 12 noon, and that is when our live coverage picks back up. We'll have that for you both over the air and online. Paul with Headlight.News, thank you again for your time.
My pleasure.